It's 15 minutes from our first speaker, 15 minutes from our second speaker. Then we'll have about 15 minutes of sort of conversation between them, and then we'll open the floor up to about 15 minutes of general questions and answer at the end, if that works okay for everybody. So on my left-hand side we have Alan Darley, who is a third-year PhD student studying Thomas Aquinas specifically. And on my right we have Octavian Maxim, who is obviously president of the Atheists and Humanists Society here at this university. So yeah, that's enough from me really. 15 minutes, Octavian. Over to you to make your, I suppose, pitch on this matter.
Yeah, thank you very much. There is an old thought experiment where you have to picture a donkey or an ass who stays in front of two equal pots of food. And they're all equally attractive, there's nothing that distinguishes them, and because he cannot decide, he dies. And this is meant to be an example of how asserting that free will doesn't exist is absurd. Well, this particular example is actually quite easy to solve because presumably the principle not to stay hungry is enough of an asymmetry towards staying hungry and dying as to choose other means of choosing by tossing it a coin if you're a donkey, I guess. So that's not too interesting, but I will use a similar principle today. I will try to put Alan today in front of two equal pots of actually quite distasteful food and see how his free will does if he chooses to not have any or if he chooses to bite the bullet. So let's see how well I do in this. I will start by explaining what free will is and what determinism is, the position I'm going to argue for. I will then explain the concept of a choice and declare that it's only meaningful in the context of determinism and not in libertarian free will. I will comment on the fact that even topics like moral accountability, moral responsibility are only meaningful within determinism and not within a libertarian concept. And thirdly, I will argue that there's three key issues in Christian theology that have a big problem with free will either way, either under determinism or under libertarianism, and that needs accounting for. So, the definition of free will, as found in the dictionary, is something like the ability to make choices that are not controlled by fate or God. Or, in other terms, that are unforeseeable. There's no, even if you have all the information in the world, like a God would, you wouldn't know what this person is going to do because it's in his free will. So, if we picture our world, this being an icon for the whole of our world, and we were able to duplicate it quant by quant, atom by atom, every single bit, and have, let's say, eight copies of our world. And then we run time from now, and let 10 years pass. And then we want to see what happens after those 10 years. Well, if determinism is true, then all the outcomes will be identical, okay? So if you know the state of the world at one time, then it's sufficient information to predict what's going to happen at a different time in the future, okay? No free will, no opportunity to have chosen otherwise, because all the outcomes are the same, given the same beginning circumstances. The alternative is that, well, determinism is not true, and some of the outcomes after that time being passed are not identical. Now, it's now not clear still if it's due to chance, due to whatever free will entities are at work, but you can clearly see that the only two possibilities for this thought experiment to end are either by all the outcomes being the same, or by some of the outcomes being not the same. So I hope I'll have you on my side till now. I will use this experiment in the future to explain my points better. Okay. So talking about choice. When we talk about free will, we inevitably talk about choice. But I will make the bold claim that actually choice is a meaningless concept if we invoke free will. Now I want you to think with me on this example and to analyze the steps that are necessary to make a choice. So first of all, you need to have some kind of a goal, right? So you decide something in order to achieve something else. So let's say your goal is to have delicious ice cream and to be pleased by the taste of this delicious ice cream. Okay? At this point, it doesn't really make sense to talk about will, because why you like something is not something you decide. You're kind of born with it. If you're the strawberry type, either something in life happened that you associate strawberry taste with something nice, or you're just born that way. Okay, so you don't decide what to like, you just like what you like. Now, second step is you have to consider all the options that would get you there, right? So I have strawberry, I have vanilla, I have chocolate, I have, name it, cinnamon ice, and I realized that I had to choose one of these options to get to my desired goal state of enjoying ice cream I really like. Now, the next step is to gather information, right? I have to invoke into memory instances of me having had ice cream before, or me having had other similarly flavored stuff, and see how my body reacts to these kind of simulations, right? I can imagine, for example, eating a vanilla ice cream and see, okay, would I like that right now? I had vanilla ice cream yesterday, so I'm kind of bored. Move to the next, I will consider how eating a strawberry ice cream would feel like, and I say, oh yeah, this would feel really nice. So the third step then is to select the option that matches the goal, right? So if I select the option where all the evidence in my consciousness points towards, okay, this is strawberry, strawberries should be the choice that pleases my palpative, gustative senses the most, then I'm going to go for strawberry. So at all of these points, there's always a clear contingency between why I did something, and there's no point at which I actually choose really in the free will kind of sense, right? Because think about it, you don't decide to have an idea. An idea comes to mind. You're almost grateful to your brain, oh, thanks for this great inspiration I had. You see something and this triggers a memory that then leads to an idea. You're really an observer of what you say. You're really an observer of things coming into your consciousness and triggering certain emotions, triggering certain feelings, on the basis of which then you take the only logical way, the only option that leads to the goal that you declared before. So what would free will add to that? Well, if you only ever, by the axiom of reaching that what you want, choose the best possible option available with the aid of all the information available, then asking for the ability to have done otherwise is asking for the ability to not have chosen the optimal option in that situation. And my intuition is that the reason why people want this free will ability to have done otherwise, to have chosen otherwise, is because of hindsight bias. We don't judge our choices by the information available at the point. We like, okay, I ate ice cream, and it was strawberry, and it was shit, right? So I wish I would have done otherwise, and you know what? I probably would have. I could have just chosen vanilla instead. But this is obviously a false assumption, because the new information that flooded to consciousness when you ate the bad strawberry ice cream wasn't available at the point when you had to make the decision. So the decision should be judged on the information available to you, not what outcome there was, and if ultimately it was a good decision in terms of outcomes. So, my time, just checking my time.
10 minutes.
Right, 7 minutes. So, choice is only ever meaningful if we get some kind of consistency between, or contingency, between the information that led to the choice and the outcome. If we step outside it, it starts to become meaningless. Let me illustrate this a bit further into moral accountability. There's a common argument in philosophy that says, look, if the murderer didn't have a choice, if given the circumstances he wasn't, he would have always murdered. Is it not weird that we punish him, that we held him accountable, that we make him responsible? He couldn't have done otherwise, right? But because we have moral responsibility, therefore it cannot be true that free will doesn't exist. That's the argument. But imagine this. Let's say this was true, the determinant is true, you could have not done otherwise. In all the scenarios, the murderer would have killed the victim. Well, at least we can say that this is truly you. The system which made the decision to kill, it's consistent throughout all possible worlds. It was everything you lived so far, every information available to you led to you killing somebody else. The alternative would be that you're just one unlucky guy amongst the possible worlds who, by what reason, however what reason, chose to kill that person. There's another possible world in which you wouldn't have decided, given all the same information. Okay? So while it's true that the murderer couldn't have done otherwise, it is true that the system as it was, with all the information about punishment and laws available, he did choose to kill the victim. So punishment makes sense because we now input new information to that system. We now introduce negative reinforcement to somebody who has chosen murder so he doesn't do it again in the future. And this is also the reason why we treat people who are drunk, people who have psychopathic tendencies, people who are young, for example, differently. Because even if they knew all this stuff, they wouldn't have chosen otherwise, right? They cannot process the information about deterrence, they cannot process the information about laws in a meaningful way. That's why we discount accountability. It's not because they don't have free will, just because their system deals with information in a different way. And so accountability doesn't come from I could have done otherwise. It comes from a flexible system which responds to information in a dynamic way. That is changeable, that is responsive, that was informed. So meaningful choices are not really compatible with free will, but more sensible within a deterministic framework. Moral responsibility makes more sense within a deterministic framework because at least we know we like that person is a system which, like, across all possible worlds we've done the same. It's meaningful to punish him and hold him responsible. He's not just one unlucky dude amongst all the possible worlds. Now, this brings me to the point about theology and the three claims that it makes. So first one is the doctrine of original sin. It's essential. The only reason why we need Jesus to save us is because some person a couple of thousand years ago decided to eat the apple, right? So the explanation given is that God gave us autonomy, gave us free will, and from that moment on, he wasn't able anymore to influence our decisions, okay? He didn't know that Eve is going to eat the apple, and even if he knew, he wouldn't be able to stop her, because it's her free will, right? But think about it. If Eve was in this universe, where she could have done otherwise, then the only reason that we're screwed is because we are kind of in an unlucky iteration of the world, which happened to be in the universe where Eve chose to eat the apple. All the same information being given, all the same warnings, all the same snakes, in some other possible world, for whatever reason, she would have chosen not to eat the apple. That's the proposition of free, libertarian free will. This doesn't sound like a very responsible God, does it? On the other hand, if we take her choice for like a consistent, like all the information available led her to eat the apple, then this is something that God should have known. And if he knew and let it happen, then he's just kind of a dick, right? If he knew and couldn't have, then the whole like inconsistency of omniscience, and omnipotence kind of starts to crumble. The second claim that is problematic is the claim of evil. Evil exists because we have free will. So the world is good, but some people decide in their own free will to do evil acts, right? Now, if this is true, then again you need magical free will, yeah? You need free will in which you could have done otherwise, because it has to be the kind of action that God didn't foresee, wasn't able to influence. So you need magical free will. But then it begs the question, why did somebody choose something evil? Was it just an unlucky person in this iteration of worlds? Why would anybody, all the information being equal, choose something evil, although God informed the world to be good? It doesn't make sense. The third claim is the kind of way that heaven and hell works, and that kind of divine justice is supposed to work. So I, in my free will, chose to accept Jesus in my life. Well, either you're in the first universe, and then there was no possible way under which you could have not chosen Jesus, which is fine for you, because, you get all the good stuff in heaven. But for me as an atheist, it also means that all the information being equal, all the experiences I had in my life, all the experiences I have received, and this is stuff that God should be in control of, wasn't enough to make my brain, accept Jesus into my heart. So there was nothing I could have done. So who comes to heaven, who goes to heaven, who goes to hell, is a completely arbitrary process. Now, again, let's assume that libertarian free will is true. I could have chosen otherwise. There's another world in which all things being equal, I chose to accept Jesus into my heart. Well, good enough for me, but how about Alan? Alan, in this world, chose to accept Jesus into his heart and be a Christian. But in another world, everything else being equal, all the information being equal, all his education being the same, experiences being the same, he chose not to. Bad for him, right? He got lucky in this universe, in this iteration of the world, to have chosen so. It seems very arbitrary, doesn't it? And the kind of point about accountability that I made in this world doesn't make sense when applied to the eternal. Because here, I made the argument that it makes sense to punish somebody because it informs not only him, but also future people in a determined way about things we should do and we shouldn't do. So the agent which gets punished is the agent which can react to the punishment. But eternal punishment is outside your knowledge, it's outside your experience, and it's outside any possible way you could improve on it. So by the time that you are judged on something that either was fairly random or predetermined, you're already screwed. You cannot do anything to change it, and the punishment is eternal. So either determinism is true, in which case Alan has to explain why I as an atheist will go inevitably to hell because I don't accept Jesus, and why it was so hard for God to prevent original sin happening. Maybe he's just a good pitch marketing man because he needs that to sell Jesus later, right? Or the second is true, in which case Alan has to explain to me why this particular instance of the world in which he chose Jesus is more valid than any other world with all the same information, all the same experience. So I hope I put Alan now between two very, what's it called, anesthetic options, and he has to bite the bullet in each one of those because, again, there's only two ways this can go. And I think I explained very well why in either one he has to make a concession to one of the core claims of Christianity. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Octavian, for taking us through free will, the concept of choice, and moral accountability within determinism. I'm now going to go over to Alan for 15 minutes, where you can lay out your case, and then we'll have a bit of dialogue between you. But 15 minutes.
Thank you. I don't know if you've seen the Monty Python philosophers football match, but on that clip, Nietzsche is sent off by the ref for accusing him of not having free will. So I'm pleased that our chair's not sent off Octavian yet, because I'm enjoying the debate. I'm also very grateful to Octavian and Unash for arranging today's debate. I think these are really important questions, and it's really important that we have these kind of public discussions about it. I'm probably not going to be able to cover all of those points in the 15 minutes as well as my own case, but I'll try my best to get through as many as I can as we go along. Some will be in the next round. I noticed on the Facebook flyer for this event, the advert described the event, we, Unash, will be demonstrating that we are Unash aimed of who we are and how we think. I'll stand up actually. Reason Week is a celebration of free thought and curiosity, which we hope you will thoroughly enjoy. And again, this is something I would agree on. I think this is really important to celebrate reason and free thought. In fact, I also find myself agreeing with Octavian in his way of thinking, because I believe that if he's right, if atheism is true, then he is right in saying that there's no free will. Okay, that conclusion is consistent with his atheism, and Octavian is more consistent than many atheists on this point. But I think many of you who've come tonight will find that conclusion a little bit bizarre, particularly if you read the flyer and you saw that this Reason Week is all about free thought and reason, and you come along and you find that the Unash speaker doesn't even believe in free thought. So this might be a little bit puzzling. It would also be puzzling if, when you look at your own basic fact of consciousness, and you realise, along with Sam Harris, who doesn't believe in free will, but who admits that the endurance of this notion, this is a quote from his book, the endurance of this notion is attributable to the fact that most of us feel that we freely author our own thoughts and actions, however difficult it may be to make sense of this. So many of you will have come tonight intuitively believing you've got free will. You find that the Unash speaker doesn't believe in it. You might be disappointed. Sam Harris, again, ironically, in a book published by Free Press, writing a book called Free Will, doesn't believe in free will. He calls free will an illusion. He says that you are, in his words, a biological puppet. So it seems to me that the goal of promoting reason in Reason Week is totally incompatible with this doctrine of denying free will. And this is because, and this is where I'm going to disagree with Octavian's definition of free will. Free will, on the definition I'm defending is called virtue libertarianism, which kind of goes back to Aquinas. And it doesn't say that that free will has no motivating reason for it. In fact, Aquinas is very helpful in showing that free will is an organ of the reason. It's an intellectual appetite in De Veritate, which means about truth. Aquinas writes, reason is the radical cause of all liberty. In fact, the very word intelligence comes from two Latin words, inter and libere, which can be translated to choose between. So free will is an essential aspect of intelligence. But if determinism is true, then there are never in fact two options to choose between. There's only one inevitable outcome, as we've seen. And so it follows that if determinism is true, there are no intelligent beings. And since it is precisely intelligence and free will which distinguish us from the lower animals, plants and machines. One aspect of Richard Dawkins' thought, for which he's quite famous, is the whole meme theory, and in which he tries to explain thought purely by some kind of virus of your head, which there's some kind of virus which colonizes your brain and causes you to think. But of course this leaves no room for free thought either. I asked him on a recent visit to Nottingham in the Q&A, I asked him how he thought that he could escape his own meme and look down on his meme and know that his theory of memes was true. Dawkins didn't actually answer that question, he just broadened it out to the wider, the problem of the whole neuroscience issue for thought. He didn't actually answer the problem, he just extended it. A consistent atheism will usually opt for some kind of physicalism or materialism. So an example of this is Alex Rosenberg in The Atheist's Guide to Reality, Living Life Without Illusions. He claims that all facts are reducible to physical facts, which of course leaves no room for free will. Free will is one of the illusions which we need to give up, along with other sentimental ideas like belief in a purpose for life, any meaning in history, any moral difference between right and wrong, he says is an illusion. Rosenberg writes, the love of stories comes to us in a package that also includes the illusion of free will, the fiction of an enduring self, the myth of human purpose. A scientific worldview has to give up all of that. Then he goes on to say, what is more, neuroscience has already made it plain how the brain thinks without its thoughts being about anything at all. Thinking about things is an overwhelmingly powerful illusion. So we see that he begins with the premise of atheism, from which follows physicalism. He denies free will. He ends up denying that thoughts are about anything at all. So presumably his book is not about anything at all. Now this is an example in philosophy of what's called a reductio ad absurdum. It literally reduces to absurdity. But if the conclusion is absurd and the reasoning is valid, then the only logical option is that the first premise is false. The first premise of atheism, that there is no God, must be false, since the conclusion is so absurd. Some people might say I'm just using a fallacy of unwanted consequences. But it's much more than this, because what is actually being said is that the condition of the possibility of all thought has been destroyed, and all that's left is nihilism. So we see here the self-defeating nature of atheism, since the more consistent an atheist is with his own presuppositions, the more out of touch he or she will be with reality. The actual fact of consciousness, moral choice, free will, thoughts being about things. But the more he or she wants to hold on to reality, the more out of touch they will be with their presuppositions of atheism. That's the atheist dilemma. The late great Christian thinker Francis Schaeffer showed great... How long have I got there?
5 minutes.
Right. The late great Christian thinker Francis Schaeffer showed great insight into the modern condition, writing back in the 1970s. Excuse the non-inclusive language here, he was writing in the 1970s. He said, "The tragedy of modern man is that he doesn't know why he is different from the machine." He doesn't know why he's different from the machine. In other words, by rejecting the theological answer, and that's part of what Harris is trying to do here, he doesn't like the theological answer, but by rejecting it, he's left kind of free-floating and perplexed, with no rational answers to existential questions. We've seen this explored in a number of sci-fi movies, like Blade Runner is a classic one, where, you know, Nexus 6, Roy, at the end, he epitomises the human condition. All these moments will be lost like tears in the rain. So he represents the human condition, doesn't know why it's different from the machine. But perhaps the biggest problem with viewing people as machines is that being a machine is incompatible with being a moral agent. So I'm disagreeing again with Octavian on this. You cannot be justly praised or blamed for an action over which you had no control. There's a moment, this is going to take too long probably, some of this might have to go into the second part. There's a moment in Blade Runner where Blade Runner he's been kind of wooing this machine called Rachel. You may have seen this. There's this kind of ominous bit where the music changes and it looks like he's going to sexually assault her in some way. Bangs her against the wall. Suddenly the saxophone comes in and becomes kind of nice again. But Rachel is a machine, so like, does it make any sense to say to rape a machine or to sexually assault a machine? Later on in the film, well, actually all through the film, there's a suggestion that Descartes himself is also a machine. So then you've got a machine raping another machine. What sense does that make? But the question is kind of asking us, how do you know that you're not a machine either? Dawkins actually admits it. Dawkins says, "You are, or we are, survival machines. Robot vehicles, blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. What are all of us but self-reproducing robots?" But there's a certain logic again that if it's true that human beings are machines, then it's perfectly acceptable, there's nothing wrong with treating people as if they were machines. So then you can have an all-powerful state, and we're getting this now, which can manipulate every area of your life through genetic engineering, through the media, through laws, through education. Various things can manipulate you. That's perfectly acceptable in order to bring about the desired results of that all-powerful state. 2 minutes. Harris even admits that the whole justice system is based on a Judeo-Christian belief in free will. But he's willing to throw it all out and replace it with a form of manipulation for the desired ends of the state. So, there's one final point. Some scientific studies, quoting science here, some scientific studies have shown that it's biologically useful to believe in free will. People who don't believe in free will have been shown to be more aggressive, to be less helpful, to cheat in exams, and therefore it's actually good for the state to encourage people to believe in free will, even though apparently it's an illusion. So what we've come to then is that if atheism leads to this self-contradictory belief in illusions, a completely unlivable position, it's failed 2 primary tests for truth, and what good reasons remain to be an atheist? Thank you. I didn't answer your points, I'll have to come back to that.
No, well, that's
Okay.
what
We have plenty of time.
we'll be doing hopefully now. So thanks very much for that. Very interesting arguments there. So Octavian, perhaps I turn to you. Maybe I know you've already laid a few challenges at Alan's door, but do you have any responses to any of the things that he was just saying?
Yes. First of all, I have no problem of seeing myself equal or even inferior to a machine if sufficiently sophisticated artificial intelligence is being developed. And I think we have a duty to extend our moral principles not only to sentient animals but also to machines which can feel and can communicate this feeling to us as well. So it's not absurd that a machine reps a machine. It would be absurd to deny that a sentient machine who reps a machine is not a crime. And I think that's, I mean, it would take quite some balls to not agree with that. Anyway, second thing is, you talked about control and morality, and I think control, you equivocate again with free will. So, if the cause of the action, which is, let's say the murder, lies within the system that's being punished, so the brain, the organism, then it's perfectly consistent to say this organism had control, because it was a causal link in the murder. Now we can picture a system without control. Let's say an implant was made into the brain of the murderer, which directly caused the murder in the absence of the brain, which is flexible and responsive to have any influence on that. So this is what the distinction is. But both the control and controlless option are perfectly consistent with determinism. Because when you punish brain, it needs to be, like, the punishment needs to be a response to a choice made in an unoptimal way, right? And the only way the brain can respond to it is by learning. But if it wasn't even the cause of the action, then that would be pointless. That's why we don't punish kids as hard, that's why we don't punish drunk people as hard, or that's why we wouldn't punish somebody with an implant at all. But we do punish people who are responsive, who are learning, who can improve their behavior, right? So control does not equal free will. Then the third thing, see, I didn't talk about science at all, although I could have. I could have brought physical causal closeness. I could have brought in evidence from neuroscience which shows that our intentions are a cause, not the cause, an effect, not the cause of an already ongoing neural process that we are unaware of. I brought you a situation where you just have to simply decide between outcomes. And I would like to ask you, you call it virtue libertarianism, is that correct?
Yeah.
So you say it's not uninformed, there is some information, a virtuous information, which does inform your choices.
Yeah.
The question is, this still applies, right? So either your virtue informs you all like in the same way, so all elements have the same virtue, which are outside the physical universe, but they inform you in the same way. Or they don't inform you in the same way, so the same virtue leads to different outcomes, in which again you have to account for the almost arbitrary extra kind of causal interference in the system. So don't see how like virtue information is any different from any other information in terms of the two outcomes you have to decide on and what that means for the three claims of theology. So I leave it at that and give you the opportunity to respond.
Yeah, thank you. So the kind of freedom I'm defending is not the kind of Sartrean freedom sort of that you can do absolutely anything you want to do, or one which doesn't have any motive. Because it's a faculty of reason, free will has a reason for it. What I'm saying is that the reason doesn't entail the choice. It doesn't determine the choice. It gives an explanation for the choice, but it doesn't infallibly determine it.
So this is a plausible outcome of the world. There is an element which
well, the thing
wouldn't
about
have
these
chosen.
different possible worlds, it's not just a change of environment. A change of environment wouldn't change my free decision. If it did, it wouldn't be a free decision. The free decision is ultimately explained, in part anyway, by the agent themselves, by the agent himself. The agent is not an effect, the agent is a cause. And that was a strange thing about you. Earlier you said that you were only an observer of your own decisions.
Yeah.
So you were not an agent of your own decision.
I mean, agent is again a hard term, but I would feel so. Because every process, memory, retrieval, selection, simulation, these are all processes that happen. Like we don't decide to think a thought. It just comes to mind and we observe it. we don't really decide what we say. We kind of listen to ourselves speaking as we go. It all is being pre-processed in the part that we're not aware of, and the moment it's in our awareness, it's already happening. It's already happening. So there's no point at which we have choice over what we do. Interestingly, Eastern philosophy has got that. They escape the struggle by saying, look, it's not about free will, it's not about like determinism, we don't have any choice, it's about mindfulness. We just have to be aware of what is there and just ride the waves of life in our minds to be happy, not to try to take control, because inevitably that's absurd. Take control, what does it mean to decide, I will decide now to think a thought? It has to be coming from somewhere. Something had to trigger this thought, something had to make sense. It's always a stream of consciousness, it's not like chunks of undetermined, uncaused pieces of thought that then cause something. So yes, the system is an agent because it's a kind of like a moral, what's it called, angle in a stream of events. Like a thermostat is a causal is a causal agent, right? Without a thermostat, the heat wouldn't go down or up. So it is the thermostat causing the heat to change, but the thermostat couldn't have done otherwise if the temperature
then
changed.
there's no persistent conditions which give you a specific identity as Octavian Maxim. You're apparently not an agent, you don't cause anything. All you are, there's a series of effects that are inevitable, going back to the Big Bang. And there's just a process.
Yes, then
There's no
I'm
actual,
aware of the
so
process.
you've ended up really denying your own identity. And in fact, that's quite revealing that you want to go in an Eastern direction, because that ends up basically everything is one. Everything is the impersonal everything, which is the same as everything is nothing.
Besides you not liking the outcome, what other reasons there not to believe that what I say is true?
Well, as I said before, it's not simply an unwanted consequence. It actually destroys any possibility of rational thought.
Why?
Because there's no self doing any thinking, for a start.
It is still my brain.
There's no way you could weigh up evidence and come to one conclusion rather than another. The outcome of your thinking is inevitable. So unless there's some reason, unless you had theological determinism, which I reject, but unless there was some mind behind you as an effect, there's no way of telling that your thought is rational. It's just stuff happening.
I mean, rational thought is thought that best leads to a goal that you predefine, right? So you can say if a thought or an action or decision was rational based on the information available to the agent.
And there is no agent, there is no you.
I mean, you equivocate again a person and identity to having free will. So I don't deny that I exist. There's my consciousness, right? And stuff happens in my consciousness. And my brain processes information. So when my brain takes 2 bits of unrelated information through its computation, it creates new information. By that, it becomes a causal agent. It becomes a causal entity, if I don't want to use agent, right? And I am aware of this process. This is what makes us human.
But it's not a causal agent, it's just an effect.
Well, it's in fact, it becomes a cause like everything else. Like, if I drop this, this is too big example. If I kick this is the effect of me kicking, but it's also the effect of my hand putting on there, and my hand taking this is also the effect of my brain doing stuff. So obviously every effect is also a cause. That's not a mystery.
Does this way of viewing the world and free will have any impact on the sort of the country you see, the society we are? Do you think there needs to be changes in light of these new developments in thinking, as you would see them?
Yeah, I would say that we need to become more compassionate, because we realize that if people are in situations that they are, it's usually because they have been where they have been, and we have to make reality different in order for these people to be able to decide differently. So we need to input new information into the system in order for things to change. We cannot just say, this guy became a murderer because he's evil, because that's the theistic kind of explanation. He's just evil, he decided to commit sin. But I would say that there is a plausible explanation for why he became evil, for why he murdered something. There's a perfectly consistent causal explanation of this action, and the only way we can change this from happening in the future is by making sure that the system doesn't produce this choice, or doesn't favor this choice, right? So I think it makes me more compassionate because I'm not judging on a just world hypothesis, everyone gets what they deserve, but I'm judging on, okay, there's reasons why you decided that way, and I'm trying to give you other reasons why you should not next time. I think that's a more loving worldview, very ironically, than to say that people in whatever faculty decided their fate.
So, just on that example you gave, and I'll come back to another question. In this world, what if a world was so constructed where the outcomes for murder were actually positive? Would that mean in such a world that murder could actually be encouraged because there is no sort of moral category given to murder?
Well, by the definition you made, if it was something positive, then it would be something positive, right? I mean, if things were different, things were different. But I cannot envisage a new resolution this happens, because if people consistently kill each other, there's nobody left to, like, do something about it. Kicking in the balls, because that's not fatal, it doesn't, like, reduce the population. Let's say kicking in the balls was a good thing, then if people enjoy it, then obviously we should, endorse kicking each other in the balls, because it's fun, right? So, yes, I would say that the consequence of an action does determine its value.
I wonder, just in terms of free will and theology, to go back to a more sort of practical example, because I don't want us to just get lost in matters of high philosophy. If I'm somebody who has never experienced the Christian God, and I haven't been educated to know it for a whole variety of circumstantial reasons, I think this is the point that Octavian was mentioning earlier. How then is it fair to say that I have free will in such circumstances as those? Free will not to choose.
Jesus God.
Well, I think this is a point, the fact that free will is only possible if there is a God, and that he can only justly judge people on the basis of free will. So if the situation was such that they couldn't have done otherwise in that kind of situation, then I don't believe that God would judge people badly based on a lack of knowledge. Because we're not, it's not Christian to think that we're saved by knowledge, that would be a kind of Gnosticism. So and for love to exist, we mentioned love requires free will, so that's not possible under
So you decide to fall in love, or do you fall in love?
You can choose to act in a loving way.
But based on what?
Based on free will.
So there's no information.
Well, and also based on what you perceive to be good.
What you perceive to be good, passive process.
Because free will is all things desire the good, so our decisions are based on what we perceive to be good.
That's what
So there's a great diversity within things which are good. So there's freedom within that.
Right. Good. We've had a good 15-minute discussion down the front, and we've heard 15 minutes from each of our speakers. So now I'm going to open up to 15 minutes of questioning, which should take us to around 20 to 9, and then we can go to Mooch or whatever those people want. But yeah, so go to this gentleman first.
Well, my question is for Octavian. Yes. So my question concerns the possibility of pure contingency, and I think it cuts to the very heart of the question. So I hope you'll bear with me while I explain it. How can you define or even think of pure contingency? Contingency is ordinarily defined as the negation of the modal operator of necessity, for possibility is simply the not impossible. But if pure contingency can only be defined in terms of necessity, then every defined term analytically contains its definition, then it seems that even contingency necessarily contains necessity, and thus is not pure. This question can also be applied to the opening metaphor Burden's asks. For if you affirm that choices are purely contingent, then no determinate choice is possible, even of the appetite between two equally attractive bills of pay. And if, on the contrary, you affirm that the choices are purely necessary to determine, then each determination of a choice between the bales of hay remains equally determined. You might respond that if determination were true, then the donkey must choose. But even if the donkey must choose, even to starve, it cannot decide between two equally attractive bales of hay. Resolving this aporia seems to require some mixture of contingency and necessity, some mixture of libertarianism and determinism. But if there is no pure contingency, then all of our choices are not purely contingent. Choices are meaningful, and free will could be true. So how would you respond?
Okay, so thank you very much for that. I hope I got like 63% of that. Well, so is what you're saying that because of examples like Buridan's ass and other conceptual analyses, there cannot be pure contingency. We have to have some leeway. Okay, so two responses to that. Buridan's ass, I kind of mentioned at the beginning, funnily, and I said that at the point at which something is truly equal, which is very, very rare to happen, this is, by the way, when we feel most uncomfortable and caught, funnily. Like, when we're the most free, because there's no obvious way which way we should lean, that's when we feel most imprisoned and like, what the fuck do I do, right? So, the story should give some indication of how decision works. But then, when this is really the case, we substitute that decision by another decision, right? We substitute, okay, do I rather stay here or would I rather eat? And then you say, okay, I'd rather eat. And then you say, okay, I just take what dominant hand, I throw a coin. I do something which informs my decision, because I'd rather not die. So, the higher principle of not starving informs, or like, draws new strategies to inform the choice through other means than they are already available. So we always need some contingency, something to base. The more interesting question is there a possible state of the brain in which, like, independent of the situation, there's basically a zero-sum neural kind of signal? Can the brain be in a state where the action potentials don't go anywhere? They always cancel each other out, let's say, something like that, right? Maybe for a split second, but there's enough chaos in the system anyway, which...
So, if I interject, on the hypothesis, we're assuming that there is this brain state. That's not a question. The more important question is whether it's possible to choose one bale or hay or the other. But when you say that there's a higher order principle that allows you to choose between them, you're actually changing the hypothesis. You're changing it to say that there's not just two bales of hay that are equally attractive, but there's also some higher order principle on which you can determine between them. But that higher order principle itself requires that you can choose the higher order principle. So you're actually introducing free will in order to resolve the aporia.
I'm choosing another option. I'm introducing another option.
Yeah, you're introducing a third option that's not already available in that hypothesis.
It is, I mean, there's only so much an analogy or a thought example can describe the world, and obviously you have to grant me that the option not to eat or to eat are also options within the Buridan's ass's reality. So I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I don't know if there is free will or not, but looking at the reality rather than an analogy. So from the moment you're born, most of it is determined. So the way I like to look at it is like a game of chess. So a game of chess has about, I don't know how good your imaginations are, 10 to the power 50 possibilities, and that is just an estimate. So let's say humongous number, that's bigger than the biggest thing you can imagine.
Okay.
A lot of moves in chess.
Yes. Basically, there are a lot of moves in chess. So, but here's the key point. Once you get to a certain point, the number of moves you can make converges. And there's very little for you to choose from. So even if you consider that example, from the moment you're born, your genes, your environment determines how you behave, where you go, what you do. So even with that in mind, there's very little free will. And even if you take an astrophysical point of view, now string theory, not proven, says that there are an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities. However, even if you take each one of those possibilities, within those possibilities, there is no free will, because that's why there are those other possibilities. So within each of those universes, free will would not exist as such. Do you have anything to say to that?
First
The question is for both of you.
first of all, determinism is unproven and actually unprovable, because you can't prove a universal from any amount of particulars. You can never get to the state of saying that all events are determined without knowing every single event, which is impossible. So this is a problem generally with induction, which is why Popper came up with falsification as an alternative. So basically, determinism is a faith position. It's not scientifically provable or proven. Also depends on belief in cause and effect, which is a bit awkward if you're an empiricist, because why would you believe in cause and effect if you can't actually...
Well, not
physically
everything needs to have a cause.
Well, in which case determinism is false.
I grant you probability and determinism. Like, it doesn't help you with free will because it's just random, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not what you're arguing for. You're not arguing that the universes could be different
I'm
on
arguing
a
against
random.
determinism.
Sorry?
I'm arguing against determinism. Yeah, it's also the case that indeterminism doesn't get you free will.
Because I showed you that, like, in either case, like, you still have something to explain. So.
Yeah. Also, the thing is, a lot of the problem is based on looking at the situation as an external observer, but it's ignoring the most obvious elephant in the room, which is your own self-consciousness. When you go into yourself, you cannot deny that. You cannot deny your own consciousness. And
What do you mean?
a sort of strong example of that would be the experience of temptation, where you feel there's a dilemma between something you want to do and something you feel you ought to do. One's kind of your duty. But one choice is like a line of least resistance, say the thing you desire.
But that is your environment acting on you. See, that's what
Well,
I'm
yeah, but
saying.
that's a dogmatic statement. I'm talking about what it feels
It's
like.
proven.
What it feels like as the experiencing subject. You feel, okay, it'll be easy for me to do this, but this is what I ought to do, and you intuitively feel you can make an effort of the will to overcome what you really feel most easy to do, and do the hard thing. All of us can identify with that as an experience as a psychological experience.
Yes.
Okay, so why should we deny that basic experience in favour of some second-order theory which cannot be proven, and even if it were true, would depend on consciousness in the first place? So,
Look, is it, for example, if I have to study, but I could also watch movies, then the invitation to watch movies is hard. It's the easy way, and having to study would be the hard way and have to employ will, which again, in this case, is a different kind of will, to study, right? But the reason, there has to be a reason why then I decided to study, namely that I think, I went for all the possibilities, it's probably more important for me to study. My decision to study was based on information already available to me in this world after my mind did all the simulation stuff.
yeah, but there's a reason for it. But the thing is, you feel that one is taking you an effort of the will. But on your view, whatever is the most difficult to do must actually be the most easy thing.
But again, it communicates cognitive effort with free will, right? So just because something is hard, like maths. So if you do a maths question, do you decide the answer? No, like you just go through calculations and the answer will always be the same no matter who does it, if he does it correctly, right? So like you decide the answer, but still you employ cognitive effort. The question is, in the same situation where I decide to study or watch a movie, would I always have chosen to watch a movie? Or in some situations, under the same circumstances, would I have chosen to study? And if this is the case, that I'm just lucky enough to, for whatever reason, be in the world where I chose to study, then which of my choices can I trust at all? Like, I feel that it's not me who has to account for the self and identity, because at least I'm consistent throughout all possible worlds. No matter what, given all the same circumstance, I'm still the same. Whilst you have to kind of justify why this version of you is better than all the other possible versions, which had uncaused kind of, causal interactions which would have led your life in the other way. So you could have been a criminal because in some moment of temptation, you just didn't choose to do the right thing and kill somebody, right? So how are you now better than the other person, and why? And why should you take credit for that?
Dave, you.
I have a question. It starts with Octavian, but you're both welcome to Octavian, if you have, the analogy you drew at the beginning, you said that you have two cases. You have either all worlds that are exactly identical give the same result, or they give different results. If you had a world that was probabilistic, so 80% of the time
Yeah.
you got one outcome and then 20% you got another, would that not still be, deterministic, even from a sort of metaphysical or physical perspective, even if you would get the same outcome every time?
Possibly, probably not, because that's the definition of not determined, that I don't know for sure what comes. But, I mean, the point is that I don't really care about that. I grant you both universes, and you still have to explain free will in a meaningful way that is not self-contradictory. That's, see, like, I mean, a quantum event is just really not determined. Like, I don't know what happens. In a probabilistic way, I do, so maybe on a large scale, but a particular event I cannot predict. I mean, that's fair enough to say that that's not determined, I guess.
Okay, I'm going to challenge both of you. But I have to propose something different. I see of Tyrion, you are actually very concentrating on small scale cases. Mind, atoms, small decisions. And you, sir, you concentrate on actually slightly bigger scale, but generally speaking, small scale decisions. What I'm proposing is that in a small scale, we do have freedom. We have a lot of freedom. However, in the massive scale, no. I approve. Now, in a small scale, actually, as an individual, I can actually calculate how much weight this is, how much weight this is, and then I can calculate how much force I have if I do it long enough. I can actually validate each and every of these atoms, where they are in the whole process, how are they going. So in a small scale, maybe it is determined. However, the problem is I surprise both of you. I surprise both of you. So, are you saying that I don't have this freedom of tearing apart papers or throwing pens or using the pen to poke the wall, although I'll get a lot of money, a big bill, of course, but I have the ability to surprise people to some extent. Where is that extent? However much paper I destroy today or tomorrow or in the course of my life, the earth still spins around the sun. There is something in the physics, basically speaking, you can't change, and we all agree that. However, our theory goes, it has to be agree with our observations, like the sun, the earth around the sun, and other things that we can't deny. That according to our sense, if our senses are correct, if we're not the brain in the big jar or whatever, then of course it is things that we can't deny, and there's things that is actually determined. And there are things like every 10, 15 years, unfortunately, human stupidity could lead to people into, say, financial crisis. Every time I see both of you, you actually construct your idea on a very, very profound, very philosophical ground. However, what taking your mind of consideration of human stupidity? Doing stupid things, doing things that are out of control.
So you said you surprised me. The question is not if I'm surprised, because I don't have all the information. The question is, would God be surprised that you did that?
Well, if it's me now, I will say God will not be surprised.
There
But
you
if it's me, like 2 years or 3 years ago, I will say, what is God? Because at that time, I'm still Buddhist, where there's nothing on this planet, no start, no finish, eternal cycle. No start, no finish. You have free will, but that free will will carry with you to the next life, to the next life, to the next life, to the next life. But Buddhism is interesting because both of them, it proposes one, a world which has huge amount of world. Here. Then, when you go to deeper, Buddhism proposes to you, look, yeah, the world can be that beautiful, but the world didn't exist. The world didn't exist at all. You see what I mean? If it's now, I will say God will know. But if it's Buddhism world, then what is matter? What is existence? It didn't exist at all. You should forget about it.
Thank you very much for that. Very interesting and well expressed point, vividly expressed. Would anyone else like to speak? Would any of the girls like to speak? We haven't heard from any of you yet. No? All right. Anyone else got any other questions?
I have a follow-up question, if I may.
Go on then.
Okay, so I thought the decisive point that was raised in the discussion afterwards was between agent causation and patient causation. Basically, what you were saying, Octavian, was that all causation is simply an effect of what's caused to the patient. So that there's simply a cause-effect transmission from one cause effect on it goes all the way back all the way forward. And then what Alan Darley was saying was that rather than contrary, that the agent can itself initiate new causal sequences. That is, they're not caused by anything prior to themselves, but they can affect posterior causal sequences. This is what's called causus sui, or self-causation. And the idea of self-causation is intrinsically tied to Christian theology, because God himself is self-caused.
Yeah.
He sets into motion the cosmic universe, and precisely because God creates man in the image of God, therefore man has the power of self-causation himself.
Yeah.
So I see that this is a fundamental theological divide between you, and one of the reasons I think is because, and I think it was brought to the fore when you mentioned your acceptance of Buddhism and of Eastern theology, because once you deny that...
A very, one particular point of
Yeah.
that. So.
Okay, so here's my question. So if you deny that, if you deny free will, and if you deny that the universe, or that God sets the universe into motion, then it seems like it's question begging. That is, it seems like you're assuming the consequence because you've already assumed that the universe has no self-causation.
Okay, so you say that there's a thing called self. So my intention to do something out of my own volition is a newly instantiated cause for further effects to come.
Yes.
I mean, that's just neuroscientifically wrong. It's proven that an intention is a cause of an so the way to do it, it's an EEG experiment that measures on very high temporal precision the activity that goes on in your brain. And you have a peak at which your attention, the agent, the participant feels attention, and then you have a peak when you actually does the action. But you have a constant build-up, which is distinguishable from the noise before, towards the intention. So the conscious perception of intention is actually in effect of a cause, the effect of a cause which started in this case the putamen and basal ganglia, which are not neither implicated nor part of the conscious system, right? So it's boring to say that, oh well, science tells you you're wrong. It would be much fancier to tell you a philosophical argument for that, but that's just how it works. Our intentions are a cause, and always are a cause. And
Can I come in on that experiment?
yes.
Yeah, coming up.
That experiment is actually has different interpretations, and I recommend this book by Alfred Mele called Free. He responds to that. So, well, for a start, even if that proved what you said it proved, that wouldn't prove that all decisions are caused by the unconscious before we know about them. As I said before, trying to prove the universal from particular. Second thing is it's only 80% accurate according to Libet's own studies. But more importantly, what it seems to be is what the electrocardio machine, whatever, that takes those readings off your head, what it seems to be showing is some kind of preparation for a decision. But it doesn't actually tell you what the decision could be. So it's like if I said to you, after 3 seconds I want you to move your wrist, and then I say I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, get ready, 1, 2, but after 3 don't move your wrist. Okay, your brain has still got ready as if you were going to make the decision to move your wrist, but at the last minute you didn't. The reading on the brain would still look as if you were going to move your wrist. So that kind of experiment doesn't infallibly predict what someone's going to do.
You get a reaction time increase when you get
free will.
You get a reaction time increase when you introduce conflicting information. So the point that you say don't move the wrist, you extend the time of processing. It takes longer for you not to move the wrist, or it's already the baseline. But there is an additional effort which has to process the new information of not moving the wrist, which wasn't there before. And
well,
even
you can't
if
rule out
not,
that interpretation, though. That's just special pleading. You can't rule out that interpretation. That it's just like your adrenaline starts to rush before you're about to do something.
also,
but you might decide not to do it.
Also, it's not analogous because in Libet's study, the instruction was to spontaneously move your hand when you want to, whilst if you already give instructions 3 to 1, this just means that there's pre-potentiated, the intention and the basically the motor trigger already happens, already in your hand, and then you just release it. So it's not analogous. If you said, okay, spontaneously move or not move the hand, then you could read beforehand, before the intention was formed, whether or not he's going to move the hand. That's the point.
Right, so what I'm going to do, unless there's any other questions from the audience, I think what we'll do is have just a 2-minute closing statement from each of you, just to sort of summarise what you've said, say what you've said, as it were, pick up any final points.
You said unless there was no questions.
Well, it's up, I mean, it's up to people whether we want to
I want to
carry
hear
it.
the question.
Yeah, cool.
I want you to question anyone, please.
So, you talked about the atheist's dilemma, and I wasn't sure I fully understood. But is it the case that you're arguing that because there's no discrete point at which we can say one person is a discrete entity, but we have to sort of treat them as an approximation over a series of states that they exist in their life, that there is
You're
no...
conflating 2 points, though that was a point I made later.
Okay.
My original atheist dilemma was that things which Rosenberg calls illusions, which most of us call part of real life, like ethics, morality, first-person language, thoughts being about things, history has meaning, life has meaning, all those things he says are illusions, that is a consequence of an atheist premise logically followed to its conclusion. So the dilemma is, do you stay with the atheist premises and be out of touch with reality, or do you stay with reality and be out of touch with your atheist
Why
premises?
is the atheist position out of touch with reality? I'm not sure I understand.
Well,
So
we
you don't-
can
you
disagree
don't
with
think
what our experience of reality, I suppose.
But
In that
it's
sense.
not clear.
Well, you don't think that thoughts, thoughts are about things?
Well, I think
And,
you interpret thoughts, you interpret the mechanics of a thought, yes, in the same way you interpret a book, but if you don't speak, I don't know, Mandarin, and you're the only human being left, if you get rid of this guy, and you book in Mandarin, then it doesn't inherently mean anything to us, right?
我真的不知道你们在讲什么。I'm speaking Mandarin. Here.
Right, okay. Unless you have any
yeah.
response you want to make to that point.
I'm asking the man the question. Leave him alone.
Yeah, I think the philosopher Searle uses that actually to argue that we do have immaterial mind, the idea of the Chinese experiment. I forgot the detail of it.
Chinese room.
Chinese room experiment, yeah. So if the brain was just a physical kind of stimulus thing, you wouldn't actually have any concept of meaning. You wouldn't actually understand Chinese. You would just see if there were symbols. I've forgotten the detail. Maybe Ryan would.
Say like there is a room, a book, big book.
Yeah.
That's a set of notations, mathematical notations or whatever instructions. A very, very big book. Concern of everything how to translate English into Chinese, and then how to translate Chinese into English. Then someone outside the room send you, like me, I write Chinese to you, but you don't know what it is. So you check all these, look all these notations out in the book. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, you use that rule, that instruction that's printed in a book, which will be very massive. And let's not forget about you are actually a mortal person. You are only, say, 40, 50 years to live, 100 years to live. You have infinite time to live, so you go through all these books, check all these notations, go through all these rules, and then it turns out to be an English sentence that you can understand. Now you understand it, and so you write a response in English. Okay, you write it down, then you go back to the book. Go back looking for these lines, going through the whole instructions manual, going through the instructions, and then you draw all these Chinese out. And then you throw that piece of paper, however you do, you send that piece of paper out. And then let's assume that outside people feel that it's like seconds. Then they will assume someone inside here is a Chinese, which you aren't, which is really just a set of rules.
Yeah, I think the point is that if physicalism was true, there'd be no difference between it as a stimulus and response, someone looking at something and then doing the right thing, and somebody actually being Chinese and actually understanding the meaning of the language. So the fact that there is a difference, Searle uses as evidence of an immaterial mind.
I mean, if the book is in your head, that's where you know the language. It's easy. Like,
It's just the point at which the interpretation occurs, right? I mean, the room understands Mandarin, or in this case, Icelandic, because
Rosenberg's going further than this. When he talks about things being about things, he's saying that that can't be described in physical terms, which it can't. You know, this book is about something. But that, if you was just a pure physicalist, you just talk about the, you know, the weight of it and the atoms in it. You wouldn't know anything about the meaning of this book.
you know the
Would
big
if you
thing.
could
It's not actually about anything.
No, it's
If
not
it's
actually about-
if physicalism is true.
But there's nothing inherently meaningful in the pages. There is only the interpretation that you get.
But you see, that's an absurd conclusion, isn't it?
No,
Because
why
it
is
destroys me. Harris was not written about anything.
The book isn't about
More than that
the
is, that's just a
words.
collection of physical atoms.
But it is atoms. You're denying that the book is
Yeah,
made
but it's
of
not
atoms.
reducible to that, is it?
But
Only-
it is.
That's
The
only
meaning-
one
the
level of
meaning-
explanation.
the
The other
locus of
level of
meaning is not
explanation
in
is
the
its
book.
meaning.
The
Yeah,
And the
locus
fact
of
that
meaning
somebody
is not in
wrote
the
it, an
book.
author wrote it.
Yeah, somebody
Meaning-
set out atoms in a certain way so that it would be intelligible to somebody else who could recognise the patterns.
To somebody, yeah, but an atom can't understand an atom.